Hello all, welcome to the show. I'm Gus Gagliardi and this is Fire Code Tech. On Fire Code Tech, we interview fire protection professionals from all different careers and backgrounds in order to provide insight and a resource for those in the field. My goal is to help you become a more informed fire protection professional. Fire Code Tech has interviews with engineers and researchers, fire marshals, and insurance professionals, and highlights topics like codes and standards, engineering systems, professional development, and trending topics in the industry. So if you're someone who wants to know more about fire protection or the fascinating stories of those who are in the field, you're in the right place. Hello all, welcome to episode 24 of Fire Code Tech. In this episode we have Robert Agnew. Rob has a PhD in environmental sciences as well as a master's degree in industrial hygiene. We also get into Rob's time at Oklahoma State as a student. In this episode, we talk about Rob's fascinating career with his origins in fire and life safety. We get into Rob's roles in environmental health and safety and some of the interesting project work he's been a part of. Rob tells us all about the program at Oklahoma State, more specifically the Fire Protection and Safety Engineering and Technology program. We get into Rob's history with the program there as a student, as well as what OSU's FPSET program is doing today and moving forward. We get into some really great tips for professionals, as well as where Rob sees the industry going and some topics that are new or emerging for professionals. Really enjoyed this episode. It was one of my bucket list episodes to be able to talk to one of my great professors from OSU from my time there as a student. They were hugely influential for what I'm doing today. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe and give us a review on iTunes. Let's get into the show. Well, Rob, welcome to the podcast. I can't tell you how much I'm excited about having one of my former professors at Oklahoma State come talk to me on the show. It's a real dream.
Well, great. Well, thank you. You're too kind. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So I just wanted to start out in traditional fashion and ask you about your genesis in fire and life safety and kind of how you found your way into it.
Sure. It started all the way back in high school, and maybe even a little before, doing taking CPR classes. Junior lifeguard. Though I never was a junior lifeguard, I started taking the classes for it. My mom was a nurse, and kind of just had a inkling towards taking care of others. And my best friend from all of grade school joined the county search and rescue team. It was a wilderness, search and rescue team, and we were part of a explorer post attached to the sheriff's department. And I spent all 4 years in high school on the search and rescue team. You know, back when we had pagers, the old Motorola Bravos. We get called out and go and search for lost hikers, or sometimes we'd assist in evidence searches. Unfortunately, we had body recoveries we went on, and that really got me into this whole service of community and others. It encouraged me to take my EMT, my emergency medical technician. So I did that as actually I started the class before I even turned 18, but I finished after I turned 18. So I had my EMT and did my ride-alongs, those sorts of things. And all along, I was kind of interested in fire. We worked several wildfires with county fire, supporting county fire. I got to, you know, help coordinate helicopter activities and manage radio channel allocations, working at a command post. So I've been using ICS and wildfires since the early 90s. So that was great. It really just got me into this. And so then it was, well, what am I going to do? I kind of thought maybe I'd go fire academy. My mother was like, want you to look at college too. And so I started asking around, and everybody kept saying, you got to check out Oklahoma State. They got this great fire program. And so I went to the library. This is, very much the dawn of the internet at that time. Went to the library, found some information, made some requests or info, and decided to come out and take a tour. And at that time, classes were in Station 2, the campus fire station, and just absolutely fell in love with it. In fact, I didn't apply to any other college except OSU. Coming from California, it was a 1,500-mile move, uh, but I did it and never looked back.
Man, that's incredible that you had such an early start with life safety and just EMS and kind of getting a feel for what it looks like to be involved with fire and life safety. That's pretty incredible that you found your origin in it so early. I think you're one of the few I've talked to that has a beginning of their career that resembles that.
Yeah, I think the folks I went to high school with would say I definitely found the path that certainly matched my interest from that age.
That's good. That's good you found your passion early. I see a lot of people struggle with that. So I wanted to follow up on that line of conversation with, you know, just a little bit more about your first professional roles and kind of what those looked like as your career progressed. Yeah.
Uh huh. One of my first, I guess, jobs in the profession, I it was kind of an internship with the OU Health Science Center, uh, which I was still just wrapping up my undergrad at OSU and was starting to feel the pull towards the industrial hygiene arena. I had performed a waste anesthetic gas exposure assessment at OU as part of my one of my industrial hygiene projects for class. And from there, I got an internship and would spend winter break and spring break and sometimes the odd weekend and parts of summer at the Health Science Center doing all kinds of stuff. And that's where I first kind of exposed to the environmental side and waste management. It's, being a, 20 or 21-year-old and getting called to the animal research facility for a waste pickup. And I walk in the door and said, "I'm here for the waste pickup." I go, "Yeah, it's over there in the freezer." And so I opened the freezer and sitting in there are four animal carcasses. And I looked to the lab manager and "Are those baboons?" He goes, "Yep." Oh,
Oh my gosh.
yeah.
That's incredible. That sounds like something that would throw
Yeah.
anybody for a loop. I was about to put the qualifier in there for a student, but no, I think anybody would
Yeah.
be.
And so I asked him, I said, "Well, what did you do to them?" "Well, we infected them with a virus and then we tried to kill it with radiation and it didn't work."
Wow.
And so,
Jeez.
yeah, I had a biohazardous radioactive waste to try to figure out how to dispose of. And I found one incinerator in the country that could accept that waste stream.
Oh my gosh. So from the very, early on in your career, you were tasked with getting creative and solving some interesting health and safety problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And right after that, my first, I guess, career jobs with Seagate, a hard drive manufacturer, and we built a facility in Mexico. And we had a series of small fires, and we could never get the fire department to respond. Uh, they had one station for a town of 300,000 people, and so we were a bit down the list. So we had to go down there and build our own fire brigade. And so trying to learn how to communicate. I spoke a little bit of Spanish from my upbringing in California, but trying to go down there and coordinate and train and build a fire brigade uh, down there and work with fire prevention laws in Mexico, or the NOMS, which are uh, not exactly what they are here in the U.S., but they're based on it. But trying to translate them, you try to put an American bent on it, and you're not even sure if that's right. And so there's a lot of challenges there early on with trying to work internationally on fire prevention issues as well.
That's fascinating. I always have a real interest in how, model codes and standards work outside the US. So, yeah, there are multiple points there. Uh, I wanted to ask, I realized after you got started into your professional roles a little bit, so it sounds like industrial hygiene and some of these more safety focused classes was kind of what spoke to you when you were attending OSU. But yeah, I just wanted to ask. What was some of your favorite parts of your experience when you attended OSU in the FPST program?
Yeah, that was it's an interesting transition. I went from really thinking I wanted to be a firefighter, to coming here, looking at the really I was very focused on the fire side, which even today a lot of our students come here and like fire is on the forefront of their mind, and then you start taking some of these safety and occupational health classes. You go, wow, this is a whole other world I didn't know about. And for me, it was Professor Jim Hansen. He's retired now. We're still friends, but he taught industrial hygiene, and boy, he was just an exciting, energetic teacher. He got me excited about it. And one of the assignments he had us do was that one where you had to go find a real exposure in a real business and go and measure the worker exposure and write a report and take it to management and say, you know, here's the results. And that working with people, I really liked. Uh, you know, not to discredit those that work on the engineering side, because God bless them, they do a great job, and I appreciate everything they do. But for me personally, working on design didn't appeal to me. Um, Working with people, that hands-on, talking to them, trying to help them with their health and their long-term health outcomes really resonated with me, and so that's just kind of how it changed and evolved, at least my outlook on what I wanted to do while I was here at OSU.
Wow, I like that answer. Interested in, it seems like you're always interested in a challenge and interested in the human aspect of that challenge as well. So I think
Certainly.
that's interesting. But so I wanted to move on and
Hmm.
talk about the majority of your career in industry was as an environmental health and safety professional in different gradients of that role. But yeah, always when I get professionals on the show and it's a kind of a career that I haven't explored yet, I like to get a sense of from somebody who's done it, what that looks like. So
Hmm.
yeah, I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. So the most of my career was actually with Raytheon Company. Started out as a environmental health and safety engineer, became a manager, worked my way up eventually to a senior manager with a big section of a business unit, multiple facilities, managing comprehensive environmental health, safety, asset protections, what we call the fire prevention side of things. And all of those things deal with administrative law in one way or the other, either the OSHA standards, the EPA regulations, the fire code. And my kind of elevator speech, if the CEO bumps into you on the elevator and says, what the heck do you do? I always like to say that the environmental health and safety department maintains the company's right to do business. Because if we don't do our job, if we hurt people or we pollute the environment or we burn the building down, we're not in business anymore. And this is kind of this, you have a foot in both sides. On the one side, you're very much a representative of the company, and again, defending its right to do business, keeping the doors open. On the other side, you're also the advocate for the employee, protecting their health, protecting their safety, convincing management that wearing a respirator all day is terrible. And I think that may be the one very small silver lining of the COVID-19 pandemic is that every manager in business in the entire globe now knows that wearing something on your face all day is terrible. And so hopefully we can get more engineering controls and ventilation controls rather than putting everybody in respirators. And so that's kind of that rule. It's just that protecting worker health and safety and protecting the company's right to do business.
Yeah, I have a friend who works in for a company that's in a mining operations, and he's an environmental health and safety expert. And to your point about maintaining the company's right to do business, he's unfortunately had to deal with the costly implications of a business, that has had safety incidents. So
Hmm.
I mean, it sounds like a nightmarish scenario that he's had to, go through with injuries on the job, being investigated by OSHA and or MSHA and some of
Hmm.
these other things that have happened. So, yeah, I think that that's a great point.
Yeah, kind of the new kind of buzzword, or I guess it's a term really, you're hearing now is social license to operate. That if your community that your business is in, if you're polluting its water or its air, the community will no longer tolerate your business. And so it's being called social license to operate. Same thing we're seeing with, conflict minerals and those sorts of things that it's kind of started to expand the scope of EHS a bit, looking at some of these supply chain issues, how they impact human health and safety, and then how that ties back to the company's right to do business with social license to operate.
Yeah, I mean that sounds like it's in directly in the vein of what we see in more of the social or the individual side of the news and the media with people getting canceled. I could see that um, kind of having to overlap with companies being canceled for not maintaining this
Mm-hmm.
social capital that is doing business in an ethical way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But so yeah, also in the vein of your career and things that I've never had the opportunity to ask a professional, I wanted to talk to you about your industrial hygienist certification and what that looks like and why you would want to have a certified industrial hygienist designation.
Sure. I'll kind of answer that general then specific. The general is just professional credentialing in general. I'm a big fan of, particularly for early career professionals. It's if it's the CIH or the CSP or the PE or the FPE, in our field, uh, what that says to employers, what it says to the employees that you may be interacting with is that you know hey, this person by education, examination, and experience uh, has the ability to perform this task. So it's kind of a warranty in some respects that the person who holds these different credentials, you know, has obviously had education in the field, has taken an exam to show that they've retained it, and they all have minimum professional years of experience requirements. And so while it's not a silver bullet, this person knows what they're doing, but it certainly adds a level of credibility to your knowledge and skill set. Now, the CIH in particular, why would you want to have somebody with that background? Is really looking into these more complex um, issues of occupational exposure. When I was working at Raytheon at the time, Ken Tierney was the head of the entire global EHS group, and he said that the CIHs that worked for him were the special forces of EHS, um, which when you're dealing with radiation, either ionizing or non-ionizing, you're dealing with how do you measure silica exposure in the microgram range or beryllium, these sorts of things requires a very specialized skill set, and that's when you want to bring in a certified industrial hygienist. The complexities of mold sampling, and if we even should do mold sampling, all these sorts of things. Uh, that's where you're going to want to bring in somebody with a CIH.
Wow, that's a absolutely fabulous exposition on why you would want to have a professional designation, as well as more specific commentary on the certified industrial hygienist role.
The next thing that's kind of coming, um, or we should talk about the PE. For those in your audience, if you're very familiar with the PE and the fire protection engineer, that's not a certification, that's licensure, which is kind of that next level. That the licensure says there's an element of the public trust that's being placed upon you and your work. That you have to calculate. With the classic one, the bridge doesn't collapse. From the civil side, but same thing with fire protection engineer. You're going to design the systems correctly to get the smoke out of the building, to get the adequate water supply where it needs to protect the public's safety and their life. And there's a big push within the industrial hygiene community to move the CIH into licensure, because you are dealing with health, just like you're dealing with the nursing professions, all these other medical professions. That the CIH, there's a push to move towards licensure because of that public trust element when we're out there evaluating, the asbestos in your home or asbestos in your school or business, that there is a public trust that needs to be maintained with that particular skill set.
That's a great note. Yeah, I see that a lot of communities are moving towards, license requirements, and so yeah, I think that as far as fire and life safety goes, it seems like that people are more interested as time goes on in buying in on professionals who are, accredited, um, because of, I just think there's greater focus on safety
Mm-hmm.
in society as we're, moving on.
Yeah, the thing about licensure is it kind of goes back to that community and that social license to operate. It's the community can remove your ability to work, to be able to do what you've been trained to do. That if you're not living up to their standards of either ethics or competence, the community can remove your ability to work, which really adds to that next level. And really, you have to be competent and check your work and make sure you get it right.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing. And, I always encourage people, and that's kind of the reason why I asked the question is I want to encourage people to seek these, not only for their professional development, but also, to ensure that we have qualified, competent individuals doing this sort of work. But yeah, so in order to, kind of put a end cap on our discussion of the incipients of your professional career and some of those roles, I just wanted to ask. I can remember quite a few different interesting stories that you told about your time at Raytheon and some of your other roles
Hmm.
in environmental health and safety. And I just wanted to know if you had a particular project or story about just time in your career that you would want to share.
Sure. I think you look at challenges. What were those challenges that you overcame, and you can, when you get through it, you do kind of a touchdown dance. And uh, for me, working with Raytheon, being in doing a lot of aircraft type electronics, aircraft parts, um, and anything in military, corrosion is a huge issue. You don't want your electronics or your weapon systems or anything like that, corroding as they're, getting salt spray on them from, while it's sitting on an aircraft carrier or sand and dust out in the desert. And so to prevent that, the basically the gold standard technology is to apply various processes that use hexavalent chromium as a corrosion inhibitor on particularly aluminum parts. The issue is that the one that works the best, strontium chromate, and all chromates in general are carcinogenic, and strontium chromate is particularly strong carcinogen. And so there's this ongoing issue. Well, how do we paint these parts and put it on and protect the workers that are doing that? But then also when these things go into the field and they need repair work and someone has to sand the paint off, that they're getting exposed to these chromates. And so there's been a big push both within OSHA and within the DoD to remove hexavalent chromium from these product lines. Or if you can't remove it, then you have to implement some incredibly um, expensive engineering controls to protect the worker. And so I worked on a project to try to remove hexavalent chromium from a particular product line that we had well in advance of when the regulations were changing. And it was a great thing from both a business perspective and a health perspective, because basically when the legislation came out from OSHA and changed the exposure limit dramatically, you kind of had a couple of choices. You could either spend all the money and come into compliance, or you could stop doing producing your part. And if it caught you off guard, then while you retooled, you were going to lose market share. And so I worked with our engineers, that are our product development engineers, to qualify alternative primers for corrosion inhibition. And so testing lots of different primers with different manufacturers, putting them in salt fog baths, and proving into our DoD customers that they worked, and proving to our management it was going to work, and implemented the change before the OSHA regulation changed. And so when that happened, our business never stopped. We just kept running. We didn't have to install showers and change facilities. We didn't have to install massive ventilation systems and airline respirators. We'd done the hard work ahead of time, and so we were able to switch that product line over to a chromate, a trivalent chromium, much less toxic, and keep the business up and running with no disruption in production. And so that was just one of those ones that I really liked for my career. It was hands on. This was back when I was an engineer before I was a manager, and you kind of miss that when you get into management. You tend to do a whole lot more politicking and paper pushing than actually solving problems. And so that was one of the last real nitty gritty problems I got my hands dirty on and was able to fix. And I really enjoyed that.
That's awesome. It's so hard as safety professionals to uh, tie back into the dollar amount of conducting business.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's a great success story on how you provided value to the company and how you mitigated business interruption, and what somebody who excels at their role can do. I wanted to transition into your time at OSU, and I know from experience that you have that you're a good orator, and that you're good at explaining things, and that you have passion for it. But how did you find that out?
So it's kind of an interesting story, and several years before I even really started thinking about it, I had colleagues, not necessarily in the EHS department at Raytheon, but in the facilities department and other these groups that I worked with that you know trying to explain, well, why are we doing this? Why are we changing out all this hexavalent chromium stuff? And so I'd go through an explanation, and I ended up getting the nickname Professor Wizard. And
I
people just
like
kept
that.
telling me, you should be a professor, uh, and it just kept coming up. I worked at different sites. I moved around the country, and just kept, hey, you should be a professor. And uh, it was one of those things that was kind of the back of my mind. I do kind of like teaching. I mean, I obviously did a lot of training as a EHS professional. You have to do a lot of training up in front of people and talking, and I enjoyed it. I also enjoy the aspect of being a professor where you do research, right? You ask questions and you try to solve these problems. Again, kind of getting back to being an engineer, not just a manager. And the two things kind of coincided together. One, the amount of travel I was starting to do was getting ridiculous. um, when my son turned 2 years old, I had spent a quarter of his life in Australia, not
Wow.
even counting all my other business travel. And so that was just starting to wear on me. It's like, gosh, I kind of want to be home a bit more.
Sure.
And I knew Dr. Larinaga, who was uh, the department head at the time. He's former department head of the fire protection program. He's also a CIH. We knew each other from conference and things like that. And he called me up one day and said, "Hey, I kind of hear you might be interested in being a professor." And I said, "Well, yeah, I kind of am." He said, "Well, why don't you apply for the job and come to interview?" And so I did. I guess, as they say, the rest is history. So,
Nice.
gave up the corporate life and came up here to be an educator and a researcher, and it's been fantastic.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think it takes a special kind of person to, I found this out in my professional career, being an entry level professional, that, the role of mentorship and somebody who wants to take the time to teach somebody is not innate. And so I think it takes a special kind of person to want to be a mentor, and also, an even more extreme as somebody who wants to, be a professor and really make that their livelihood. So yeah, that's fascinating.
Thank you.
So yeah, so I'm extremely excited to talk to you about, just for those who don't know, what is the fire protection degree at OSU? What kind of does that entail for somebody who might be looking to, get higher education in the field of fire and life safety?
Okay. Well, the program itself has been around a while. It's actually the oldest fire protection program in North America. Um, the program itself started in 1937, though kind of the beginnings of OSU's involvement in fire and safety go back to the early 30s, and started out as a 2 year degree. Kind of started training firefighters, but really it was started to out of insurance and people wanting insurance wanting some unified tactics for fire suppression, and how do we coordinate some of these things from people coming from different places to fight a fire. And then it kind of had a little metamorphosis from the insurance side to, hey, how, instead of just being really good at putting out fire, how do we prevent it? And so the program kind of took on that change that really started moving towards the fire prevention, what we think of now as fire protection engineering. And it did that for many years, until the early 70s, when the OSHA Act was passed, and some leaders in the program had some foresight and said, this is the next thing, and it's important, and we should adapt to it. And at that point, a 4 year degree was put in place, and it blended both fire protection and safety. And so when you look at the name, a lot of people just shorten it to fire protection, but it's fire protection and safety engineering technology. And so it blends both, which in some ways people go, well, why wouldn't you want to just be, really good at one thing? And I think what we see is that the diversity of these two are very complementary. That in all cases, if you're dealing with fire, you're going to be dealing with safety, and vice versa. Now your particular roles may be different. Like for me, my fire background, or what I did in industry for fire, was from a owner's perspective. How do we maintain systems? How do we inspect them? Making sure they're installed, correctly and affordably and all that, versus doing the design side. Flip that around, if you look at Dr. Charter, who's here, she was on the fire engineering side, but when you're out doing um, um, qualifications, when you install a system and you're out doing the acceptance testing and stuff, there's lots of safety aspects that have to be taken care of. There's people up on ladders. You can get Legionella inside the water of the sprinkler pipes. You need to do smoke dispersion calculations and things like that. You end up doing a real blend of fire and safety when you're looking at your hazardous materials inventory statements. You have to know where all the chemicals in your facility are. What are all those hazard categories? Sum them all up, figure out occupancy limits, all these sorts of things for the fire code. And then you turn around and EPA wants to know all of those for your toxic release inventory and for your tier 2 and those sorts of things. So it doesn't matter which career you pick as your emphasis, you're going to be doing a lot of crossover into both. And so I think that's the real advantage of this degree versus a pure safety degree or a pure fire degree, is that diversity. It adds more value to your employer. I think it helps you when it comes to recessions and layoffs. The more skills you have, the more things you can do, the better position that puts a person in to protect them from those things. And in general, I think it just makes you a better professional the more well-rounded you are.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Yeah, I mean, to your point, I'm on the design side of things, in engineering and construction design, and I've had so many instances in which, we have to assess hazardous materials and, determine if we are in the, maximum allowable quantity for a facility or a control area, and provide documentation of that hazard. So, yeah, like you said, you really can't escape it, even if you are just on the design side of things.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of overlap. So I think that's a great point. Yeah. Also, in just like the job resiliency aspect of it, I mean, it's a huge. I mean, there are two good job markets, and I mean, yeah, I think having options is an excellent pro to the program at OSU. But so I just wanted to, and I mean, you don't have to go in too in depth on it, because I know if somebody really wants to find out, they could Google the the course description and find that online. But I just wanted to ask you to, speak about a little bit more in detail what the different courses are inside the program for somebody who might be interested in looking at going to OSU.
Sure. So we start you out with a survey class. It's our intro class, and you're going to learn about fire safety, industrial hygiene, and you'll study the historic fires and why we have fire codes. You'll study the historic safety incidents and why we have process safety management standards and things like that to kind of first let you know, like, this is why we're here. This is the type of stuff you're going to be working on and trying to prevent. Introduce you to codes, because if you can't, you know, not, I don't want to say handle, but if the idea of spending a lot of time examining the fire code and the OSHA standards drives you absolutely bonkers, we want you to know early so you can find something that matches your skill set better. But we're going to give you that survey and say, if you're here, you want to protect life, property, environment, this interests you, then okay, let's move on. And then the next class you'll take your freshman year is our fire protection systems class. Get in there and work with sprinklers and alarms and really learn like the hardware. And this is really part of the technology degree. This is engineering technology, not pure engineering. We want you to have that hands-on experience with the equipment. Not that you're going to be an installer, but we want you to be able to know what quality workmanship looks like. We want to teach you ways that a contractor might cheat you. And so so that when you're reading the codes, you understand what it means when it's talking about a jockey pump, right? And what does it do? And you can actually see it and understand it in a very tangible way. And that's kind of sets your foundation. You'll take an introductory safety course too, which will put you in a confined space, and we'll put you in a fall arrest lanyard and those sorts of things. Again, introduce you to the OSHA standards and how to read them, as well as get some of that hands-on application of what do these things really do in real life, and why your 6-foot lanyard, how far you're going to fall and how high you need to be before fall protection is effective, things like that. That kind of sets the foundation there in your lower division classes. And then from there, we keep ramping up. You get more math, you get more engineering, either be on, you're going to take statics and thermodynamics. Then you're going to on the core side, industrial hygiene is a very mathematical heavy class with exposure assessment. And then process safety, getting into more complex safety things. Then you'll take fire dynamics to really understand how fire moves. I think that's probably one of the bigger changes from some of our alumni from 10 or 20 years ago, moving away from a lot of the system stuff into these bigger ideas of fire dynamics and how smoke moves in a building. You take a smoke control class, getting into the more advanced engineering. And then you'll take we used to call it the loss prevention class. Now it's a risk engineering class where we're going to pull it all together and put you out into a facility and look at comprehensive. What are the fire issues? What are the safety issues? What are the hygiene issues? What are the environmental issues? In a real building, we do numerous tours of actual factories and hospitals and libraries, other commercial buildings. You have to put your eyes on and see what are the risks, what are the controls, really trying to get you ready to go out the door. And how we finish that off is with the senior design project, or the capstone, where you and a couple other students are going to be on a team for 2 semesters trying to tackle a kind of an entry level research project. Right? It's not just something where you can go to the code book and you've got a cookie cutter solution for. It's, well, we need to go find out some things. We need to do some small experiments and read some scientific literature and be able to come up with a solution so that when you are out in the workplace and that hexavalent chromium issue comes up, you have those skills to be able to go out and evaluate a problem, come up with solutions, work through some validation that it's actually going to be effective, those sorts of things. And that's really where we kind of, at that point, we think you're ready to go out the door in the industry and be a really good contributor.
That's great. Yeah, a couple points I really resonate with is, personally, I have a huge interest in systems, and so the technology piece of the program at OSU is proven to be really invaluable during my time as doing design for a fire suppression contractor, and also now as a fire protection engineer that does construction documents. Having that entry level knowledge of the system components and how they interact, and kind of what the overall architecture looks like for a fire protection system, it puts you leagues ahead of somebody who comes into that role without the background of the program. So I think that's great. And then, yeah, also to add on to what you said about the capstone, I think the capstone is really great because not only is it something that you get to have somewhat of a say in determining, what you're investigating and kind of the problem that you're looking to solve, but also you can use that as a component to sell yourself to your employer that you're looking to get an offer from on the way out of school. If that corresponds to the field in which you are looking to find a job in. So
Certainly.
yeah, I really like that too. Wanted to also ask about, um, yeah, how have you seen the curriculum evolve at OSU since your time there? I feel lucky. I got to be you in Virginia. I got to be one of the first round of students that had you as professor. I think, yeah, I
Yeah.
think I was entering some of the classes on your first go through them,
Hmm.
but I really enjoyed you both. But yeah, I just wanted to uh, pick your brain on the topic of kind of how the curriculum and the professionals that you're help training for the next generation of fire and life safety professionals, how that's kind of changed.
Yeah, the curriculum is always evolving. Uh, I think some of our alumni probably are listening, and they have a idea of what it was like, and they think it should never change, and and other alumni who are definitely out there that are on our advisory board. They're out there in industry and they're hiring our graduates. And hey, we need this skill set. We need to add this skill set. And I think the hardest thing to do that we really kind of struggle with between the faculty and the advisory board is, yeah, we need to add these skill sets. What do we have to get rid of? you know we can't just keep adding hours to the curriculum. We have to choose what's there. So I think what you're seeing is less emphasis on I would say more the daily kind of tasks in environmental health and safety. We're not going to tear apart an extinguisher and inspect the inside of an extinguisher anymore. That used to be a huge part of 1213. uh, and at the time it was absolutely necessary. I was a big part of the role. But now employers are looking for um, something a bit different. They want you know fire extinguisher inspection. They want that turnkey from a vendor. That's not something they want an in-house person to be doing. And what they want really is the ability to evaluate risk, in whatever kind of nature that risk may be. It could be a fire risk, it could be a safety risk, it could be a business continuity risk or a business interruption risk. And they want someone that can come in and evaluate risk across many domains, and be able to develop solutions for that, to mitigate it. And so, even on the design side, if you're designing a system, uh, that fundamentally still holds. We're evaluating risks now on the fire side using modeling. We're looking at evacuation models, we're looking at smoke models, we're looking at fire growth models, which you know 20 years ago we didn't even have any of the tools to be able to do that. But now, as computers have gotten much better, as our programming of those computers and our tools for numeric methods have gotten better, uh, we're able to go in and simulate things in the virtual space with pretty good accuracy. Obviously, there's a lot of universities out there that are trying to validate those models uh, more and more so that we can use them. But that's what we're looking at. It's how do we have graduates that are up to date with the latest technology, that are using the most current tools to be able to manage these risks that are out there in the real world.
That's great. Yeah. I like what you ended with on that last part about, being able to pick up these new tools and technology. I mean, I've seen a lot of increase or uptick in people speaking about performance-based design and kind of some of these modeling techniques as a tool in your belt to be creative when problem solving
Mm-hmm.
for some of these fire and life safety hazards. So I think that's a great point. So also I wanted to say, or just kind of touch on as well about, you know, what you see as trending in, those who are hiring fire and life safety professionals right now. I'm sure there are a lot of people who are interested in that topic with the current climate of the pandemic and just, businesses in general kind of struggling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think employers, what we're seeing, they want a few things out of graduates. Um, One that's always, um, or at least we always get the comment back that our graduates are able to hit the ground running the first day on the job. That we don't have to spend a year training them to do their jobs, and that's the commodity that I think employers want. Training is expensive, and I'm not saying that our graduates don't go out and get on the job training. It's just that they want a new hire to be productive as soon as possible. And so doing things such as these industry tours and writing reports to the people that host these tours, doing these senior design projects, being able to present a product gets you so much closer, on day one to being able to go out, evaluate a problem, come up with a solution, present it, being turnkey. That's what they're really looking for. And you need to couple that with work ethic. They want people that are going to show up and actually work. Uh, I understand work is a four-letter word that ends in K, uh, but you got to get it done. you know. Uh, and so, and I think the third piece is they want you to be as error-free as possible. You've got to check your work. You need to have somebody peer review your work, um, which is one of those things that in your career people need to really develop those relationships that you can have somebody check your work, so that we don't have a satellite probe that goes to Mars and crashes into it because we use standard units instead of SI units. There's a whole list of these very high profile goofs. Uh, but even small ones, I kind of quip to my students when they take my industrial hygiene exams that it's okay if they get a wrong answer. No one's going to get cancer this time. Uh, that, but when you're out there in the real world, these calculations have to be right, or someone will get, potentially get hearing loss or cancer, or the sprinkler system's not going to work as needed. And so,
Yeah.
that's what the employers are looking for. You know, be able to hit the ground running, work hard, and be as error free as possible.
Yeah, that's great points. Yeah, something that I saw in fire suppression. The OKSTATE program kind of helped me not need as much teaching for, what is an FBA 13 and how is it laid out and,
Mm-hmm.
what are those components. So I can see how being able to hit the ground running and not needing months of training in order to, at least take steps in the right direction would be incredibly valuable.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to touch on some professional development topics because in my short career, I've definitely had some good advice from you. I think I was looking at, accepting one of my first jobs, and I was we were taking a field trip with you and Brian Hoskins,
Mm-hmm.
and we were talking on the bus, and I was looking at a couple different offers for getting out of school, and I was like, well, what should I do? This one is worth X dollars, and this one is worth, Y dollars, and you guys both kind of looked at me and you were like, well, you really need to, address these things for what's the best place to learn, and what the structure around you is going to be. Yes, the dollar number is compelling, and you gave a speech about where you start in your career is important, but yeah, so I just want to say thanks for that piece of advice. It didn't serve me wrong in my career. And then also ask, what is, do you have a piece of advice for fire and life safety professionals that you would like to issue as well?
Sure. So yeah, so I'll definitely emphasize that point that for our new grads, new hires, even people, if you've been at your job for a while and you're ready for something new, and you have multiple offers, that it's always tempting to just look at the money. Um, but sometimes those jobs that pay a lot of money are doing so because they're going to be maybe incredibly demanding, or they can't get people to stay. And so what I encourage all of my students to do is when they are fortunate to have two or three offers, is I say location can change, right? The money will come, but it's your boss. Which of those three do you want to work for? Which one's going to mentor you? Which one's going to help advance your career? uh, you know that's where you want to go, uh, because if you get the right mentor, they're going to try to help get you promoted, right? If you're doing the job right, they're doing good. A good mentor, a good boss wants to see you excel. When I was at Raytheon, I was always worried about trying to move out of the way of the people that were they're underneath me that were coming up. And so that's what you want to look for. That is, I think, the best career advice, because if you've got a terrible boss, your life's going to be miserable. You spend most of your waking hours at work, and so if it's a miserable experience, then life is miserable. So really focus on who's going to be your boss, and what are they going to be able to, or do they have the right attitude? So that attitude of a teacher, the attitude of a mentor, take care of you, kind of in that way.
That's great. Yeah, that definitely, especially in your early career where you're going to be spending a lot of time learning, making sure that you're in a position to have somebody who can facilitate that um, startup energy that it takes for every professional to, kind of come to fruition. It's
Mhm.
important to have that. So I think that's a great point. Also, I just wanted to ask, you're someone who is well informed, and just like what kind of resources would you recommend to students or professionals? It could be technical or just kind of business driven. I always like to ask this question because everybody kind of has their place where they get professional information, or
Mhm.
kind of their, I don't want to say news, but keeping an idea of what's happening in the industry. But
Right.
yeah.
So I encourage my students, I encourage this for professionals and all your listeners as well, is that you need to be involved in your professional society. So if you're on the fire protection engineering side, Society of Fire Protection Engineers, you should be a member. If you're a safety person, it should be, uh, you know, the Society of Safety Professionals. If you're an industrial hygienist, it's the American Industrial Hygiene Association. You need to be involved. You're going to get, at a minimum, email alerts about what's happening. You'll probably get some kind of periodical from them. They may also have an academic journal that you may want to subscribe to. But they all put on a conference as well. And I strongly encourage you to go to a conference, even if you're not certified. Though everybody with certifications needs to go to these things for their professional development points. So you're kind of forced into that. But even if you're not forced into it, I encourage you to go to the conference and participate. Don't just pay your money, go there, and then sit at the tiki bar the whole time. Go to the sessions, learn what's coming up, what's new, what's challenging. And the reason is because you're going to figure out where you can leapfrog your uh, your peers, not just even just your peers, those that have a lot more experience than you. So this is really apt for early career professionals. I figured out early on in the industrial hygiene realm that asbestos is a big deal, but there's no way I'm going to catch up to these experts that have spent their career of 30 years dealing with asbestos. You can't overcome that learning curve. And so it's not a fair fight to try to, advance along that path. However, if something new is a new hazard or a new issue arises, uh, now you're on a level playing field. And so for me, it was arc flash. Arc flash started becoming a big deal. It really had not been something that had been addressed very well across industry. And, I saw it at a conference, and then I went and took some professional development classes on it, started working with our electrical engineers and maintenance personnel, electricians, and became, you know, the arc flash guy. And, you pick a few of those, kind of with hexavalent chrome was the other one, and with arc flash, you pick a few of these. Um, Electromagnetic energy was another one, RF, uh, where sometimes these things are perceived as hard. And so some of your peers, new young professionals, don't want to take it on because it's hard. The older professionals, they've already got their niche and they're happy, and they don't want to necessarily take on anymore. And that's where you can latch on to these things, become that subject matter expert within the company. And that's when you're going to start getting sent, traveling to other sites, being that SME for them, getting that exposure to corporate. And that's how you're going to be able to make yourself known and climb the ladder. And so that's where I think the sweet spot is looking, going to conferences, finding up the up and coming risks and hazards or threats, latching onto those and becoming that SME for your organization.
That's great. That's a great point because, I see a lot of professionals, and I was this way as well, really hungry to make a difference and, kind of level up in their career. And I think that's a solid takeaway for what you can do as a professional to make yourself competitive. So I really like that point. So, Rob, I just wanted to, end with something that has always kind of interests me in the same vein of what we just talked about with knowing about what's happening in the industry and keeping your finger on the pulse of the kind of not really up and coming hazards, but the new hazards that we're finding out how to address and, you know, manage better. But yeah, what do you see as a meaningful trend in fire and life safety? I'd love to hear about that.
So I don't know if it's a hazard per se or upcoming hazard, but it is something I find I guess thematically interesting on the fire protection side, even though that's not my main emphasis. From a an owner operator kind of perspective in fire protection, one of the things that just destroys your budget are the periodic inspections. If you think about, if you have a facility, I was at Raytheon, we had several facilities with over 1 million square feet under roof. That's a lot of fire extinguishers to inspect. So there's a lot of cost in those. And what I'm seeing that I find interesting is the trend towards the automation of fire protection inspections. There are, and NFPA 10 was changed, I don't know, it's more than a dozen years ago now, to allow for self-inspecting or automated inspection of fire extinguishers for their monthlies. And we're seeing it now on uh, the uh, water paddle switches, water flow switches in fire protection systems, that they have a little screw worm drive that can push the paddle and initiate the signal. And so this increasing automation that helps with reliability, but also at the same time is reducing labor and cost, so that, not that I'm advocating that we go out and lay off everybody because we now have automated inspection, but it then allows that labor force then to go do other risk mitigation activities. And so I find that as a real boon, uh, as we're always trying to become more efficient with our resources, in industry, that if we can get some of these tasks automated, then we can do things that require human know-how to be able to do that, to mitigate risk and make things essentially better. Uh, and I think is a really exciting trend, and I hope it continues in that direction.
Oh yeah, I have no doubt that automation and the kind of remote inspection tidal wave that's coming down the pipeline is not stopping.
Mhm.
Had the opportunity to speak to somebody who was on the new NFPA committee for remote inspections, and yeah, it's really interesting what people are doing to basically add an advantage of cost effectiveness to the required ITM, and I think it provides more reliable ITM in a lot of instances. So
Mhm.
I think it's a win all around.
There's a lot of pencil whipping going on out there.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. So I think that if we can automatically do it, and then also what you said, there's a time and a place for um, remote inspections, and it's not for every instance, and it's not for every ITM task. But
Certainly.
I think in the right application, it's really powerful. So I like that point. Well, Rob, I just wanted to be mindful of your time and just say that it's been an absolute honor to talk to you, and I really enjoyed it. But yeah, thank you for coming on the show. It's been great.
It's great catching up with you. I appreciate the invitation and wish you all the best. This is great podcast. I'm glad you're doing it.
Thanks. Thanks for listening, everybody. Be sure to share the episode with a friend if you enjoyed it. Don't forget that fire protection and life safety is serious business. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are by no means a professional consultation or a codes and standards interpretation. Be sure to contact a licensed professional if you are getting involved with fire protection and or life safety. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.